Now you'll see all the way through here I've got a picture of a boiling jug. So let me just tell a quick story about the concept of a boiling jug. So for the boiling jug analogy, everyone's aware that, you know, typically it's an electrical jug and it's plugged into a power point or on a fire or something. As the jug heats, it begins to bubble, it becomes agitated, and eventually you'll see steam or concentrate coming out of the steam. So we now know that that's boiling. So think of this, these stages like this. In the early stage, as the temperature rises, there's a little bit of agitation, almost hardly apparent. If that was a glass jug, you'd almost just see minor little bubbles coming along. Same here, you know, starting to get a little bit more bubbles are rising in the jug as this begins to heat, and they begin to expand. Misunderstandings, you'll see certainly bigger bubbles rising up to the surface. And then as it moves through to tensions, then there's a full-on sort of bubbling and the first stages of steam coming out of the jug. And when you reach crisis, that's usually when the jug is fully boiled, and if it has an automatic cut-off, it cuts off so that doesn't escalate and end up boiling itself dry. So this is a safety switch. So think of the safety switch as like this is the last stage. The safety switch kicks in, but it's almost too late, because if that safety switch fails, then that will boil itself dry. So using that analogy, what we want to do is, if someone comes to us with this stage, the first thing that anybody comes to you, and for example, they might be really agitated, they're really boiling away, something's got to them. So we often see this in situations in mining where they have a hot seat change on the vehicles. So a truck driver is driving the large 250-tonne truck around the circuit, loading and unloading and continuing that. And so they schedule breaks where they have a hot seat changeover. The incoming driver swaps seats while this driver goes and has a short break, and then they keep that going. So in a situation where this relief driver has not arrived on time, and maybe even habitually not arriving on time, this can start this whole process. You know, Frank's not giving me my breaks as we agreed, etc. And this is carried on, nobody's intervened, nobody's helped, and it reaches crisis, and the driver comes in to you as the supervisor and starts thumping on the table, and they're usually at that stage talking full on. They're usually really agitated, talking very fast, usually using physical, almost aggressive type behaviour. Because what happens when we're boiling the jug, everything expands and the bubbles rise to the top, and that's literally what's happening. The person puffs themselves up because they're in that fight mode. So, you know, as human beings, we build ourselves up and look really aggressive, and it can be quite confronting for a leader to experience that. So what we need to do is think of the boiling jug. So what you want to do is take some actions to actually activate that automatic switch. And this is what happens. So if they come in and they're agitated in that, if you've been sitting behind your desk or whatever, just stand up in a non-threatening way and listen to what they say, and then just say to them, okay, Frank, I didn't quite catch all that. Can you take a breath and run that past me? I want to understand what the issues are. Now what happens is they generally do take a physical breath and they start again. Now what they've done is, you'll notice they've just come down off the boil slightly, and while they're still talking fast, it becomes clearer the message that they're trying to get you to understand, because their need at that point is for you to listen and understand the issue from their point. Don't mistake that with thinking they necessarily want you to fix it. At this stage they really want you to hear it. So what we do then is to help bring the temperature down from that exasperated boiling point to slowly bring it down till it's simmering, and then it's settled and there's no action in the jug. So what we do to help that is we paraphrase back what we understood that they told us about. So it's us demonstrating that we listened and we're trying to understand, and that's what the person wants ultimately. Okay, so in that process, once you see them coming down and start to relax and say, yes, that's what I want, or they modify that statement at the right time, and you'll get a sense of it, is suggest that we sit down and continue this conversation. And the next stage of that conversation is, so tell me, Frank, what is it that you need to have happen to resolve this for you? So in this situation, what we're looking for is them to give you some ideas about what is it that they need. Now, sometimes they'll actually start to offload that problem to you. This is something that you should be very wary of. Don't take on their problem. What you want them to do is to take the necessary actions themselves to address the problem, and at best you might provide some support. For example, if they say you need to talk to Frank and say, okay, I understand that Frank needs to understand this, so have you tried speaking to Frank? I've tried 3 or 4 times, no luck. So would you need some support? How about I get you together and we facilitate a conversation? So it's like you throwing your 50% in, but not owning the problem. And then what you want to do then is, you've had that discussion, you come up with, okay, are these the steps that we're going to do? Do you commit to do this? Because I'll commit to do that. And then you get them to set up the meeting, preferably where you can get together and talk this through. Now, an example, many years ago I come across an actual situation like that arose, and it turned out that the truck driver actually was was a diagnosed diabetic, which meant that at a certain point in the day, when they knew they were due to get a break, they would inject themselves with insulin, knowing that when they went out for their break and had some food and a drink and that would actually keep their blood sugar level balanced out. Now in this scenario, Frank was totally unaware of the need for that to happen and just thought being late wasn't a big deal. But you can see how it was a big deal to that person, because there was a point where they would reach and get agitated because they couldn't then get the food or drink. So there are normally a lot of things, but when you get people talking together and it's facilitated, it's very easy to help bring that boiling jug scenario down. So at the highest stage, they want you to hear, they want you to understand. You demonstrate that you're trying to understand and you seek further information, and then you sit them down and you start to have a more calm discussion about what is it that they actually require as an outcome, and then what are the steps that are required to make that happen, and what can you do as a leader to help facilitate that without taking over their problem. And by the time you have that conversation, the jug is just sitting there, it's still warm, but it's no longer highly agitated or out of control. So we recommend that as a very easy, it sounds easy, it takes skill to do, but trust in the process. The process will help you get a great outcome. So we look forward to catching up with you in future video series.